You're listening to the Radio Wammo Breakfast, only on Kiwi.
Well, Māori is one of 285 new languages that have been added to the Google Translator Toolkit, which helps translators to more easily bring the Māori language into the lives of New Zealanders. Now, Google has been researching how its Translator Toolkit might impact small and minority languages since 2008, especially the ones for which Google Translate does not yet provide machine translation, like Māori. However, they've had a bit of help in this as well. Dr. Taka Keegan, who's a Māori language activist and senior lecturer in computer science at the University of Waikato, has spent 6 months at Google's headquarters in Mountain View, California, investigating how Google technology might assist in minority language revitalisation. And Dr. Taka Keegan joins us on the line this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, it's not as simple as typing in some English and then translating it. I mean, that's added the very basics of this toolkit, but it's much more complicated than that, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes to assist you, but ultimately that's where we want to go, is we want you to be able to type in a sentence in English and see a really good translation instantly come back to you in Māori.
What are the mechanics behind this? I mean, how does this happen? How do we get to the point where you can type in some English and get the translation?
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of software that's looking at a real large amount of Māori language data, and it's looking at the words that you're typing in, and it's looking at the sentence construction, and it kind of breaks it down, and then it runs it through some algorithms, and it finds out what's the best words what's the best Māori words to match your English words, and it runs through a whole bunch of more algorithms to find out what's the best way to lay it out into a sentence, and then what's the most likelihood that this is the most sentence, and then it'll present that back to you.
And what has been your input to make that system more seamless and actually make sense at the end of the day?
Well, so my thing is that Google have created these tools to work on the big languages of the world, like Spanish and French and Chinese and German, because they realised that the internet isn't really about one language. It's about letting people access it in whatever language they want to. And, English is quite a small language compared to some of the other languages around the world. So they, about 4 or 5 years ago, they decided that we're going to make information available in 40 languages, the 40 big languages of the world. And they built all these tools, and the tools work really, really well. So my thing with them was, okay, so that's good for the big languages where you've got lots of data, but how do we get it to work for the smaller languages, the languages where there isn't so much data, and which of your tools can best be reapplied to assist the smaller languages to gather more data? So really it's about that. My work was about looking at their tools and seeing which can best be reapplied to the smaller languages, like Māori language, for an example.
And where does the data that you're talking about, where does that come from?
Well, when people make translations, when people do translations, the translations that they agree to, they leave that behind. It's kind of like those kind of footprints. So really it's got to come from somewhere. When we were looking at Māori language, I input a lot of data. I went around the country, I found out whatever data was available and people didn't mind sharing. I made that available. For example, the Bible... The Bible translations are all available through this toolkit. So I've got as much data as I can, but the rest of the data comes from people using the toolkit itself.
Okay.
So there's this really cool toolkit, and you can use it for free. It doesn't cost you anything, but if you're okay, we'll keep a copy of the work that you're creating.
So does it ultimately, in order for the data to get better, it requires people with knowledge of Māori language to actually use it, to verify that the translation that they've just received is correct?
Correct.
And so then it gets smarter, is that right?
Yeah, so what happens is the more people that use it, the tool actually recognizes which translations are used the most, and it kind of gives them a higher ranking. So the hope is that we've got good translators using it, but even if you've got a translator that's not too knowledgeable, they still can tell which are good translations and which aren't good translations.
Because it starts off quite dumb, really, doesn't it? Like it'll take a word and then translate it quite, literally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it does, but again, if it figures that it's not going to be a good enough translation, then it won't provide you a translation back. It'll say, the specs are a little bit too far out. I'm going to provide you the English. Can you please provide the Māori translation?
Yeah. Now, so you obviously have a specialist interest in Māori, but in minority languages in general. So were you instrumental in working with Google for that 6 months across many different parts of the world?
So if I'd approached Google and I'd have said to them, I want to use your tools to help Māori language, they would have said to me, well, that's not really important to us. We don't really care about the Māori language. No one really outside of New Zealand has a lot of interest in the Māori language. So my approach to them was, I want to help you approach, to solve all minority languages across the world, not just Māori, but the whole lot. And then they're saying, well, that's kind of useful to us. And I'm saying, well, let's use the Māori language as an example. And I actually had 3 examples that I was using Māori, I was using Welsh, and the intention was to use Swahili as well. So 3 quite different, quite minority languages. And we didn't really get around to doing anything with Swahili, but we got the Welsh language board hooked up and we did a bit of testing through Welsh as well. So yeah, that's how I approached it.
What do you think Google's motivation behind this is? Are they just out there to do good, do you think? Or
I sat with the company, I ate and I drank with them, I went to all their meetings. The first couple of months I was there, all I did was observe and try and suss out their intentions, and I believe their intentions are good. Their intentions are true. They've got all these tools, they've got quite a lot of wealth, and looking at ways that they can reapply these tools for the better of the world. So they've got a policy that they won't do no evil, but I actually think the policy is a little bit understated. I actually think they're out there to do good. So really their focus, their assistance for Māori languages, well, we've created all these tools. We can help the larger languages. If we can do something to help the smaller language, and it's not going to cost us too much, it's not going to put us too much out of pocket or out of time, then we're going to do it. So their intentions are true.
Is Māori actually a threatened language? Is it possible that it could go, could be extinct at some stage?
Definitely. So there was some research done in the 1980s which suggested by the year 2000 as a spoken language it wouldn't be used. So that upset some people and started some programs like Kohanga Reo and a few other initiatives. But right now, 2009, we're still not assured of its safety. The young children who have been brought up speaking Māori will still switch to English quite often. So we're definitely not out of the woods. But if we've got enough people working on enough things like this initiative, then there's more chances for its survival.
So I guess this ensures its survival in a digital sense, but I guess you don't want to see it relegated to being like, I don't know, Latin, where you sort of translate stuff into Latin just for the fun of it, but it's not actually very useful.
Yeah, so Latin's a kind of an extreme example because that actually died and it was revived, right? The idea of making the language available digitally is the digital world is our children's future. So if we can bring our language into that world, then it's got more of a chance of survival. And if we can start seeing it appear on our telephones and on the menus on our TV screens, on the new refrigerators, on the cars, all of the digital things, if our language can start appearing in those areas, then it will be useful, meaningful for our children. And if it's meaningful for them, then it will survive. If it's not meaningful for our children, if they go to the internet, for example, and there's no Māori there, then it will certainly die.
It's difficult though at the moment, when you have these squabbles over whether or not an H should be in the name of a city, and there's a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah, well, those squabbles aren't within Māoridom. The Māori language speakers have no argument at all. It's other cultures that impose themselves on the Māori culture that are arguing that argument.
Interesting. Dr. Taka Keegan, thanks so much for chatting to us today about Google Translate Toolkit. Cheers.
You're welcome.
And you can find him at the University of Waikato. He's the Māori language activist and senior lecturer in science there at the University of Waikato. It's now 10 minutes away from 9 here on Kiwi. Coming up after the after the break, a track, there we go, from the Drab Do Riffs.
Every Sunday at 6 p.m.
Cheer, cheer. Welcome.